Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Hey up everybody, before we get into it, I got a request please. Could you please go and vote in our annual awards? Lots of people have, but we need lots and lots more to make sure we're getting a proper representation of what everybody thinks. This week, very excited to introduce you to, if you haven't met already, Dan Lee from _Noodles for Breakfast on Instagram. He's got a very strong Instagram game. I've enjoyed following him for at least the last 14 months. Currently him and Robbie, his partner, are travelling through South America and it looks like they're having an amazing time. So we've managed to pin him down in Colombia for a couple of days and do a recording. Not the best quality recording, he was just using his phone, but I love these opportunities where we get to talk to people out in the field. So yeah, please vote in our annual awards. We're going to announce the winners and present the trophies at the Lightweight Adventurous Festival in July. And I hope you're all coming to that in your dinner jackets. Right, let's get on with it. Good afternoon, Colombia.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, all right, you?
Yeah, good, cheers.
Noel.
Hello.
Noel normally logs on and then goes for a poo. Are you saying it's not true?
Well, I'm saying it's not true, but that's not true either.
You need to turn yourself up a little bit, Noel. You're quite quiet.
I'll turn one of these knobs. What's that like?
Talk.
Clip. Come on, that's really loud.
That's fine. Dan, this is Noel. Noel, Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Nice to meet you.
We've been coming in Dan's ears for months now as he's been travelling through South America.
Yeah, exactly that.
I've been following Dan since even before you set off, I think, on Noodles for Breakfast. I went back through your account this afternoon, your Instagram account, which is _Noodles for Breakfast, all one word. It's very good. It's one of the best Instagram accounts. It's very funny. I guess that'd be Robbie doing most of that rather than you.
Robbie has a better touch with the media than myself.
She's very good.
I guess you'd be the Clive of the relationship.
The funny, clever, attractive, younger looking one.
I was just about to say that we have quite a lot in common with regards to our Instagram accounts, because we both have really amazing Instagram accounts, but we both have hardly any followers.
Certainly true of Dan. Not about you.
Because you've got some great pictures on there, some fantastic images.
We've been out for 14 months, so we'd like to think we've got a couple of nice photos, but it's nice to see the photos of the bikes on their sides, actually.
Oh, don't talk to Noel about bikes on their sides in photographs. He fucking hates that, don't you, Noel?
Yeah, I don't like it. I think I was just brought up to pick a bike up as soon as it had fallen over, because the fuel starts coming out of it, the oil gets in the wrong places.
Yeah.
Don't you find they're really hard to start if they've been on their sides for more than a few seconds? Maybe modern bikes aren't.
They're not modern, they're 30 years old. But yeah, the carb, so we have to give it a little bit of time and open up the tank and let it breathe a little bit, I think that's what it's doing. They usually start up. It's fine. I do feel sorry for them a little bit. You have to balance it up. If you can get a cool photo, as long as they're okay, it's all right.
Well, this is something else we have in common, because I share your love for the TTR 250.
I do, yeah.
I was looking for one last night. It's one of my weekly searches is to look for a TTR Raid version with the round headlight.
Whoa.
What?
Weekly searches?
We have weekly searches.
Sorry, Dan. Noel, what are you searching for on a weekly basis?
DR200s, to try and find the DR200 that I used to have. TTR Raids. God, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, but there are definitely things where I sit there at half 11 at night and think, oh yeah, I need to keep looking for that.
You can probably set up something that as soon as one becomes available, it would automatically say, look, Noel, here's another shit motorbike for your collection.
You're the kind of fisherman that would have a little gadget that would tell him when something's bitten. Wouldn't just want to see the float bobbing. You'd have a little gadget to wake you up.
A, I'm not a fisherman. B, fuck off.
But I'm always looking for the one with the gold wheels, and you obviously gave up looking for the gold wheeled one and bought the girly purple wheeled one.
Oh, you should see how girly my Open Enduro version are. I've got my other ones rock completely through pretty much, the originals. So the only thing I could get was bitch pink colour. And I've just went and got my seat redone, a really bitch pink kind of purple. So I'm really looking girly.
And what are they like? Because they look like really pokey bikes, but do they just feel like any other 250, or did Yamaha do a really good job?
They're not pokey. They get along, but because they're natural oil burners, we can't go too fast. We don't nail it everywhere because they've got to make the journey. Like when they haven't got all the luggage on, they're pretty good enough for like the UK, to be honest, other than on motorways. But I've done about nearly 50,000 miles on mine. I can't really moan about it too much, but mine's now a 350.
50,000 on the same piston, but no, obviously not.
Probably 25 on one, 25 on this one. I actually ingested a bit of dust in the barrel earlier on in this trip, in crossing the BR319. It's a bit of an infamous road in Brazil. I had a brand new filter, fully oiled, and 3 days of riding in this dust. It dragged a tiny bit in, and that's all it took. I was using 1 litre of oil every 300 miles.
How did it get past the filter then?
You know, like you have the cages on the air filters sometimes. It was nearer the centre, so I probably should have greased the very centre of the actual cage on the inside to really secure it. But I did oil it well and oil it with air filter oil. Yeah, that was probably my undoing.
3 days, you wouldn't think I must change my oil filter on a road bike, would you?
Yeah, it's pretty bad though. In Brazil, like the ingenuity of like engineers over here and how quickly they can fix things. We took the barrel apart. We just took the barrel and got a new sleeve and piston rings. Or I had to ship the piston rings over to Brazil, but put a new sleeve in the barrel. I don't know if that's the technical term, but for less than 40 quid in a couple of hours. It's been great since, not burning any oil. My name's Dan Lee. I'm from Rushton, Northamptonshire. Yeah, that's the Rushton, Northamptonshire.
Go Midlands.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't spend all my life in there. I've done some travels. I rode my bike in 2018 to Nepal on a TTR 250. It was 30 years old now. I'm currently traveling with my girlfriend, who I met in Kyrgyzstan on the previous trip around South America, currently in Medellin. Colombia.
We had Andre on the other day, and he was in Medellin, I think he was saying.
Ah, that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, you'll get free beer now. Medellin, or something like that. I don't know.
We're traveling around South America at the moment and getting on okay in general, but have a few mechanical calamities on the way, much like the previous trip. My Instagram account is _Noodles for breakfast. That's both of us, and we definitely put in 50% each of the effort.
You liar, she does most of it, I can tell. It's a very good Instagram account, very entertaining approach to Instagram. If you like capybaras or river dolphins, you've come to the right place. Tell us a bit about your history with biking. How did you get into biking initially? Was it to travel, or were you riding as a kid? How did you get into bikes?
I had no interest in bikes at all until I was 16. My dad bought an old Suzuki AP50. I think it was 1976. So a little 50cc two-stroke from one of his mates. They had it in the back of a garage. And they're like, yeah, boy, you can get to work now. I was working at Tesco's a bit on the checkouts. I started riding that, took it down some green lanes and really enjoyed it. And then I got the bug. My dad and my uncles also ride motorbikes. I think that's where it came from. I was encouraged then.
Did you get into trail riding on a TTR, or was there other bikes in between?
I actually bought a DR600, 80s kickstart only one, as my first dirt bike. And it was a little bit too much. And I weighed probably only 10 or 11 stone. So when that thing kicked back at me, it kicked me into the sun. I started on that. It was way too much power or weight for what my build at the time and my experience. And so I moved on and actually put some knobbly tyres on a XR400, which I think is an absolutely awesome trail bike, apart from the kickstart only, but it was really easy. Then moved on to a TTR. And then on the first trip, I didn't know whether to take the TTR or the XR400, but ultimately settled on the TTR because of 6 gears and an electric start as well as kickstart.
You got this moped then when you were, what, 16?
16.
And then how long was it till you did your trip through to Nepal?
I got the AP50 when I was 16 and I was 25 when I left for the first trip. But I'd done plenty of trips on road bikes around Europe. That was like the first step into kind of adventure, I guess. Although it was all road, it was all an adventure the first time you do anything. So,
what inspired you to do that?
We just saw people online, YouTube, and we just thought naturally we've ridden around the UK. What else is out there? And I think you get curious from that, don't you? Like want to go a little bit further and further. And then with the first trip, one of my friends had ridden to Australia before, early 2000s, and it looked absolutely incredible on an old XT 600. And then my cousin was planning on riding Alaska to Argentina on a 660 Tenere. She didn't manage to do it, unfortunately, because she got nerve damage in her hand, which is gutting. But it did show to me that like normal people can do this. You don't need a massive budget. You just need the time and be willing to slum it a little bit.
But there's a big difference between going on a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, European trip to 14 months so far through South America. So how on earth are you managing to do that?
I did the first trip for 4 months to Nepal and carried on for another 4 months renting and buying bikes. And then on this second trip, I think we'd kind of had a bit fed up. Like most people with COVID coming around and you being restricted, you ultimately want more freedom. We didn't choose South America as our first destination. We chose it because we couldn't ride to Vladivostok or Magadan in Siberia. That would have been awesome to re-step some of the places we've been before in Central Asia. Couldn't do that with the Ukrainian war. We were quite lucky in the fact that we could quite easily get our bike shipped over to South America. And South America for Europeans, really easy because you don't need visas, you don't need a carnet. It's really, really simple.
Where was your bike shipped from?
Hamburg. So we rode over there, even at that point, because we slapped our bikes together at the last minute, unfortunately, we realised there were a little bit of oil burners on part of throttle. So we knew we were in for a treat when we got there. So it was really simple. We just turned up, dropped a bit of fuel out because we had a little bit too much, disconnected the battery. 2 months later, we collected them in Valparaiso in Chile.
And what does that cost to get a bike to South America?
About 1,200 euros, but that was insured. They're not high value bikes, to be fair. That was based in a container and it's based on the width of your bike.
That's per bike?
Per bike. In hindsight, maybe we were better off buying them over here, but we had always plans to head towards North America eventually. We didn't really have a proper plan, but as we stayed in South America, and if you were only going to stay in South America, you're probably better off buying a bike over here and buying it new because you can get them at a reasonable price.
Are very cheap over there?
I'd say so. So like it's not really a popular brand, but like Hero X Pulse, I think 200. We looked at them today and they're about 2,400 euros. Another friend of ours only bought a 150, so they are smaller bikes, but the Honda XR 150, he travelled for a year, didn't really have any problems other than altitude. It's a bit tougher, but he probably lost about £500 or something off a brand new bike over 1 year.
And you can get insured and you don't have to have an address if you buy a bike over there, or is there a way around that?
I think it depends on the country. And as I didn't do it, I don't know the ins and outs, but I know quite a few people have done it and it seems to be fairly simple in Colombia anyway. Argentina, if you buy a bike in there, you can't leave Argentina with that said bike.
14 months is a long time to be travelling. How on earth are you affording it, or is it just really cheap over there?
We slum it when we can, but mostly we saved up before COVID, during COVID, and after. We haven't spent a lot of money on our bikes. Both of our bikes were £1,000 when we bought them. I already had my bike anyway, and shipping it wasn't too expensive. So we had to save and save. We haven't done any work since, and we won't be coming back and buying any house anytime soon, put it that way. But we've stretched our budget as best as we can. Fuel's cheap and you can camp in a lot of countries.
You can forgive those bikes a lot if they only cost you £1,000. That's fantastic, isn't it?
I tell you, the thing we should have done really is taken our barrel and our piston to a proper machine shop rather than me at home honing it in and then sticking some new rings on it. I really should have been a bit more aware of what I was doing than that. what I was trying to bite, what I was biting off with this trip. Like, that's my fault really, but I've been okay in general. And you can always top the oil up.
You do seem to be doing a lot of work on them though. Did you have any mechanical knowledge before, or have you just picked stuff up along the way?
I did, to a point. I'm by no means professional. I like to piss about with a spanner and tinker. But yeah, we've had a few issues, and mainly they came from like two issues. We were crossing the Amazon from Bolivia to Manaus, which is like the center of the Amazon. There was this 3 days of just really dusty hell. Horrible, but even worse when it's wet. So I guess we were lucky. But we had new air filters on at the start of this, fully oiled, maybe a bit of extra grease around the edges could have helped. But we were riding along. I ingested a tiny bit of dust, bad luck and stupidity on my part. But Roberta, her cam chain tensioner broke in the middle of the Amazon. But luckily, we just got on some tarmac. So that was pretty good. So we had to tow her back. Her cam chain tensioner had let go. And now if you look on the forum, you look on Facebook, there's not really any mention of cam chains going on these bikes. And it wasn't like particularly noisy, but it went all the same, but it bent all 4 valves. So that was a pain. We weren't really to know because there was no like telltale signs, and it just went. And so when we disassembled it, when we got to Manaus, we had to tow the bike back to a small town, organised to put her bike on the back of a pickup truck, on the back of a lorry, and then on a boat to Manaus, the city. And then we went to like a kind of back street mechanics where it dropped us off. We couldn't tow our bikes around the city. We ended up putting 2 different types of Honda XR valves in because they fit and it worked. But the sad thing was the cam chain tensioner, not the cam chain, the cam chain itself had been knocked and had a couple of tight spots in it. Can't get those in Brazil. You can't get any parts really for our bikes of their oil filters over here. So we had to come up with another plan. Our next plan was to send it to a bigger city on the coast. So we put the bikes on a larger boat. So we had to ride with that dodgy cam chain for 3 kilometers or something like that maximum, but 3 nervous kilometers onto the boat, taking it down the river to a city called Belém. On the way, I had another issue. Like, we've been sick quite a lot along the way. Food poisoning in Bolivia 7 times, I think, between us. And this mechanical issue was a pain. We really struggled over this time, to be honest. It was what it was. We just had to lump it. On the river, somehow I don't know what happened, but one of my bollocks swelled up to the size of a peach, just randomly, and I was lying in the hammock on this boat in so much pain for a few days till we got to the centre of our destination. I had to go up, get to the hospital, bump starting my bike. I don't know why, it just didn't want to start, to go to the hospital to get it all sorted out. And then, so we had more bad luck. And then we went further down the river to Belém.
Hang on. I want to know what's wrong.
Well, hang on.
Come on.
Yes, do hang on.
What was wrong with the testicle?
Sorry. When it was 3 times the size it should, I couldn't walk. It was fucking pain. But they said I had an infection of some sort, and I don't know what I got.
So it's just antibiotics?
Yeah, so antibiotics and then some other tablets.
Had you been swimming? It's one of those willy fish.
Some Ben Fogel thing.
It's probably still there.
No, I don't think it... I dread to think.
Do you want to have kids?
Yeah, I had been swimming. Yeah, that ended the chances. But I had been swimming actually as part of recovering, and I had been in the river actually swimming with that the dolphin you mentioned earlier. But I hadn't been pissing in the river because I was terrified of these
parasites. Doesn't matter, it's a willy fish.
No, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure. But anyway, antibiotic, and it went down.
Yeah, it did, but it took a while.
Don't show it to us. Put it away.
When we were just at the cam chain tensioner, I was trying to find a bit to butt in and say, look, do you find all this quite stressful when there's a big mechanical issue? You've then kind of gone on to say, and then we nearly died. But I'm still going to ask the question, do you find all these things that have happened to you quite stressful? Because now you seem, you've got a great demeanour about it. It seems like you've just laughed it all off. But as all this was happening, very stressful for you and difficult to cope with?
It was a little bit stressful, to be fair. Robbie's a lot more level-headed than I am. I'll get much more stroppy with my bikes than she will, but she's quite a calming influence, really. It is what it is at this point. We're at the mercy of postal services, really, when it comes to bike problems.
So literally every part you need to get, you're having to ship in from UK or Europe or somewhere?
This time, yes, unfortunately. When we got to Belém, cam chains themselves, we bought 2 just in case something stupid like this happens again. That we had to buy that, and then we had to buy new piston rings for me, but this was over 2 parcels, and loads of different other little bits and bobs which we probably needed. We couldn't get sprockets over here. We had to buy those. We managed to find a new cam chain tensioner over here, which has held out so far. The problem is with the shipping to Brazil, we didn't realise that you get taxed no end. Say you get the 100% value of the product plus the postage, and postage is always around £100 from Europe. Between 85 and 100 is horrible. We had to pay that plus the value of the parts, and then they would add those together, and that's basically what your extra custom fee is, plus a little bit more dependent on which region of Brazil you're in. We had to send 2 parcels and we got stung twice. Over that period in Brazil, probably £800 in custom fees. The thing we have to keep telling ourselves is if you go off on a BMW GS, one of our friends, he paid £280 just for brake pads, which is crazy. And every time he buys tires, he's paying like $400 or more than that, to be honest. Ridiculous fees. So we have these cheap, shitty bikes that we can afford things to break. But in this case, it was a bit of bad luck with the cam chain tensioner, the location we were in. So we had to take the engine apart a few times along the way. But what we later found when we rebuilt Robbie's is it somehow developed piston slap, and it would become noisy just in that short amount of time. Like, I don't know why. It was just a different noise. And they blamed it on the poor fuel in Brazil, because we'd spent at this point about 3 months in Brazil, 2 months in Bolivia. And I don't know if the Bolivian fuel is great or not, but Robbie's bike was sensitive.
You'll be really familiar with these engines now. So, get them to pieces is the least of your issues, really, isn't it? You can probably get the head off it in no time. I'm just saying you're very familiar with them, so it's not that daunting when something does go wrong. It's just the hassle of getting bits and pieces, isn't it, really?
I don't like the idea of like taking them apart in a way just because of the head gaskets and things. The bikes keep going, and they are 30 years old. They're a bit knackered. We're not being really, really nice to them by any means, and they've been on the sides plenty of times. They're a travel bike, and it is what it is. They've actually allowed us to do quite a lot. We had a good run of luck recently anyway, until my starter packed in. But
your route is quite interesting. You kind of went from Hamburg to Chile, right? Sort of in the middle of the country, to the west in the middle. And then it looks like you've gone south, and then you're kind of making your way back up north again. Tell us about your route.
We shipped the bikes to Chile, like you said. We went down to Patagonia, dropping in and out of Chile and Argentina. Argentina's much cheaper, so it was nice being over there. Chile is absolutely beautiful in the south on the Carretera Austral. And eventually we managed to reach Ushuaia, which is Argentina. We span back round. We went back up north, cut across to Buenos Aires, and then Uruguay, the south of Brazil for 2 months, then Paraguay, where we spent actually quite a bit of time there. Then northern Argentina, which was incredible. That's like where all the salt flats are, like around Bolivia, Argentina, North Chile, around the Atacama. Then into Bolivia, we saw all of the high altitude areas of Bolivia, let's say. Then the jungle region, which was awesome. Cut into Brazil, down the Amazonic River, around the north of Brazil, French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, the north of Brazil again, Venezuela, and into Colombia.
Who knew French Guiana, and Suriname weren't in Africa? And I've got a geography A level.
I had no knowledge of them.
That is some distance, though, Dan, isn't it? That's amazing.
It's good, because I don't think many people go to Brazil, but it's an absolutely incredible country, and the food, the people, amazing. I know we say it about a lot of countries. Brazil is, I think, for me, really special. We got hosted absolutely loads of times in Brazil. We have been hosted lots of times in South America, and a vast amount more times than riding to Nepal with my mate. I think probably half of that is down to us being a couple riding together on scruffy looking bikes and looking really disgusting half the time.
Is that meeting people in the street or in cafes?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Just in the street, really. Yeah. In the street. We've not been approached to anything like some people do on social media, because it's a really small like Instagram page. It's just really for friends and a few people who met along the way. So we only ever get recognised like in the street, and people are interested in what we're doing, want to offer us advice and offer like some of their local cuisine.
Do the plates help, or do you just stand out a mile regardless?
I think we stand out a mile regardless. No one in their right mind would be travelling on a bike with anodized purple wheels or pitch pink in mine. Case, to be honest.
People coming up and saying, that's so 1997, that purple.
Exactly. But a lot of the time they'll be like, they see me getting on my bike, and my bike is a lot more like girly looking, I guess. And they're like, what's he doing on your bike, Robbie?
South America is such a huge continent, though, and there must be a massive variety in terrain, from, like you said, deserts to forests to highland. What have some of the highlights been of where you've been?
I guess riding-wise, I absolutely love this route called the Route to Las Lagunas, from San Pedro de Atacama up to Ushuaia, where the salt flats are in Bolivia. That was incredible. It's all around 4,600 meters up and down. To get to the start of the Bolivian border from Chile, which is San Pedro de Atacama, you have to go up, say, I don't know, 2,000 meters, maybe more. Straight up it is almost. and you cross this area for 2-3 days. There's nothing over there's a few homestays on the way. Incredible riding, tracks all over the place. You really are like in a whole different planet. That was really enjoyable. In Brazil, we were in a region called, I think it's Minas Gerais. So it's not a very popular region for people traveling. Usually you go to the cities, etc. But the Brazilian population like this area. And there's this national park called Serra da Canastra, I believe. And we were just told by a guy in a city to go to this particular mechanic in this particular town and ask for routes. And so we went there and said, hi, like, we've been recommended to come here. And the guy just told us, like, here's a really cool route. He told us. And then he was like, what are you doing? We don't know. We'll probably just go and camp somewhere. Like, come to my house. And we stayed with him for 2 nights. We ate with him and his family. Beautiful house. Really nice guy. He had a WR250F and a Honda Tornado, which is quite popular over here. So it's a bit of like just a Honda 250 trails. Like, we went out with him. He showed us some incredible routes. We crashed a lot. There's a flat plateau with cliffs all the way around and waterfalls coming across all around the edge. And he just took us to waterfall after waterfall, river crossing, single track trail, twin track trails, 2-3 days. And we ended up staying in this, I wouldn't say a bed and breakfast of sorts, but it was like some kind of like accommodation where all enduro riders go to, or trail riders go to. It was in the middle of nowhere, barely any like trails to there. And it was like horrendous storms that evening, and there was 4 of us trying to fight the water to keep it out of the kitchen. The craziest thing was we saw the local Brazilians had just left before the storm to go to the top of this mountain area, and they had to stay overnight in there, just in their jerseys. That's all they were wearing, that because the rain was that bad they couldn't see their way back, and by the time the rain had stopped it was pitch black. Slept there, huddled up together, and we saw them in the morning and they looked rough. They were safe, but it was a really cool experience.
Just those little interactions, they're what make a trip, aren't they, really? If you meet somebody for a short time, it makes all the difference, doesn't it?
There's so many instances like that, to be honest. A more recent one, I guess, was in Guyana. We just happened to meet a guy who was doing some studying for tourism. He had a load of quad bikes, and then he invited us to stay at his and take us out on the Guyanan savannah on his quad bikes. We were hammering it around. It was brilliant fun. You'd never be able to do a quad bike tour like that. I hadn't got any experience really, like on a quad bike. Neither had Roberto. We just took in turns going in the front, nearly missing every bend in the sand, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Are you meeting any other Europeans on motorcycles?
Yeah, we spent a month traveling with 2 guys. No, not 2 guys. A girl and a guy from France on T7s, and we did lots of like trails in and around Colombia. We'd met them 2 times before in Chile and Bolivia, and it was really nice to ride with them and like share it, because everyone rides differently, and if you're riding with the same person every single day, you get a similar kind of experience. Switching it up a little bit is great, and especially going on each other's bikes.
Did you ever go on a T7?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh god, and then you had to get back on yours. What was that like?
No, I love my little thing, but it seems to ping up every single rock you hit. But the T7 glides, because we weren't doing hard trails or anything. It was mostly gravel track with the odd like rock here and there, so it was easy on a T7 to manage that. I think if we got gnarly enough, they'd prefer to be on my bike.
Is Robbie quite new to riding? Did she learn to ride to come on the trip, or was she already riding when you met her?
She'd always thought about driving a van round and travelling like that, but saw us on our motorbikes and was dead impressed. We basically met up around Europe quite a few times before she moved over to Rushden, Northamptonshire. She got a licence in Milan, so it was a lot easier in Milan to do it, to be honest. So she did that, and then that was in 2020, I guess. That's the year of the pandemic, wasn't it? She got a Bandit over here, TTR 250. Before the trip, bought a Honda C90. So we have a load of those as well, because they're just ridiculous. Stupid bikes, but brilliant.
She's been swallowed up. She's as passionate as you are about it then.
She wants to get into enduro when we're back. We're going to buy a couple of trials bikes when we're back as well. And she wants to do some rallies as well. We did a couple of days with Rally Moto. That was pretty cool. But, we want to take it a bit more seriously when we're back.
So she's a natural, you would say. She's a natural.
She can dust herself off when she comes off. I think she's a good rider, really. She sometimes when we're going on these gravel tracks, she leaves me behind. I'm going around these like really big, like loose gravel tracks, and I'm not very good, really. She goes round, and I'm like, fucking hell, on the headsets. And she's like, what? She just doesn't react, or like she's trashed her rear suspension earlier on in the trip, because she just hits things so hard and fast, because she just doesn't really hold back.
You hear all sorts of stories about Central America, and obviously Ecuador's kicking off at the moment as we speak in January 2024. It doesn't sound like you've had any unpleasant experiences whilst on the road.
Not really. There was a bit of a heated blockade in the road in Bolivia. I think in South America, like a blockade is a great form of protest, or they absolutely love it. I'm not sure it actually always gets the results they want. I think it kind of upsets everyone else. But we had like one experience, which wasn't like terrible, I guess, but we were stuck at a blockade where people had been waiting there for 3 days with no real water or food. And they were refusing to let anyone by because, they didn't agree with the government, their treatment in their region. Like, the same kinds of things which really do kick this off. But they were stuck there for so long. In the end, we were there for 4 hours. And at that point, it got pitch black. They were setting off fireworks every 2 minutes. The locals had had enough, and they just went straight up to the blockade with machetes, pieces of wood, things like that. Like, look, if you don't fucking move in half an hour, we're moving you. And that was the end of it. That's the closest we've kind of got.
You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, I guess.
Yeah, that was it. I think it's quite volatile in South America. The only thing you can really be subject to, I guess, is like attempted robberies, putting yourself in silly situations, maybe. Some things are out of your control, but overall, I'd say South America is a perfect place to go adventure riding. Yes, things do happen, but you can mitigate that risk as best as possible, can't you?
Do you have a little bit of Spanish? How are you getting by?
My Spanish is terrible. It makes a lot of people laugh here. That breaks down the barrier a little bit. But Roberta's Italian. She's shit at any Latin language, really. Just picks up fluent Spanish, fluent Portuguese, obviously Italian, English. I've been leaning on her probably too much. I did try to learn for the first 6 months every single day on an app, and then I went to a Spanish school for a very short amount of time in Paraguay, but I'm pretty damn terrible. In the previous trip, we went through a lot of Russian speaking or, similar to Russian speaking countries, and we got by absolutely fine, but I don't think you'd have the same level of interaction with the people. I said earlier, we got hosted loads on this particular trip, but when my mate went all through the stands, etc., towards Nepal, we didn't get hosted at all. But I think it was harder to bond with these people because we didn't have that language. I think it's quite important. I think making an effort of some sort probably goes a long way.
If Robbie can speak Spanish, that's enough, right?
Yeah, it gets food on my plate.
So tell us about your first trip. So you set off from the UK again and you ended up in Nepal, but presumably you went through the whole of Europe and Eastern Europe to get there.
We both had TTRs again. It's the same bike as I used last time, the one I'm riding today. My friends had more problems with his bike than I did. Basically, the bikes have one point of Achilles heel, and it's the sprag clutch, and it's quite common for them to go, and he should have replaced them, but it didn't make any noises, to be fair to him, beforehand, and he should have replaced it. But so by the time we got to Istanbul, so going through the Balkans, etc., we did a lot of TET on the way down, dropping in and out. It was really good, but when we got to Istanbul, Jordan had problems with his bike not starting, like a cable had burnt out. But we've been in Istanbul for a little while. We want to get the hell out there. We had itchy feet and we wanted to move, so I just bump started him the whole time. We're like, look, Tbilisi, we need the place, we sort this out. And so I push him with my foot, sit behind him, got the technique nailed. This was the first time doing it, though. So I got him there.
Over what sort of distance are you doing that?
Oh, only to start it. You could bump start him.
To start it. Right.
Yeah. Right. We got to Tbilisi in Georgia, and he fixed the cable, swapped the cable out, bigger gauge wire. It was fine. But the first time he started it, there was a big clunk. Or it might have been when he turned it off. But it was a bearing had collapsed. So we were by the side of the road in Tbilisi with this knackered engine. Bearing collapsed. It's a bit locked up. So we have to start stripping the bike down. And he's just like, Dan, I cannot deal with this now. Please, can you just have a look at this? Because he was so angry at this point, as you would be. So we started taking the case off. We have to take individual roller bearings out of which had collapsed and count them, make sure none had fell in the engine, drain the oil, etc., and just put it back. This habit of bump starting him then continued because he didn't have a Kickstarter on his, so we had to push him all the way. We were aiming for Western Kazakhstan, but the parts didn't arrive in Western Kazakhstan because the guy hadn't sent them. So we had to send them to Eastern Kazakhstan. So we had to bump start them there. When he got the parts, okay, we don't know a reputable mechanic there. We'll do that in Kyrgyzstan. And then in Kyrgyzstan, we found a good mechanic, some ex-Russian tank mechanic. And so I thought, safe hands. We replaced it. It worked perfectly for a day. And then what had happened, we didn't realize at the time, but Jordan had to repair his carb earlier on, and one of like the float bar wasn't floating properly because it knocked, then repaired one of the pillars which hold it. So it wasn't getting enough fuel through, which was a pain. So I just carried on bump starting, because at this point I'd bump started him for
across the stands.
Yeah, across the stands everywhere. So we just carried on to Nepal. It's just a thing. It's daily life, bump starting. So you'd meet some like really cool people. People would be so curious of us, and every single time we'd leave looking like absolute idiots.
Have you ever had a Yamaha club? I always thought Yamahas were pretty resilient. They are obviously fairly resilient, but they're also...
I only had an FS1E for a year. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's been Hondas or KTMs, which are both fantastic.
Oh, well. It's staying on the weekly search list.
I recommend them. Just change the spread clutch if it starts sounding bad at all, and it's a good bike.
But it's quite nice that you've done all of this with the same bike. That's pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And I don't know, at least it makes me think that maybe I've helped bump start a bike for the furthest distance.
So you ended up in Nepal, and then presumably did you ship back from Nepal? You didn't ride back, did you?
I shipped the bike back, and it waited with moto freight just in the outskirts of London. But I continued on to Southeast Asia, then Australia, and then Southeast Asia again, like hiring bikes, buying little bikes and things. Like, you know, the typical go to Vietnam, buy a Honda Win copy, like $110, and then ride it the length, piss about, sell it for $120. You learn a lot about mechanics over there. Like when the bushes of your swinging arm's gone, you need to make sure you're hammering a few tacks to space out the rubber. Like things like that along the way.
You're hiring and riding bikes while you've shipped your own back.
At this point, we'd heard that you need to have a guide in Thailand to ride your own bike around. People do get in at borders and things, but flying it in, I think it was a bit of a pain. When my friend did it before, they didn't have any of these problems, but I would have done in theory. So I avoided that, just bought and hired bikes. Kind of treated it like two different trips, to be honest. But the first half was much more interesting than the second half because of issues. Or like it just like every day was an adventure. We probably traveled too fast, but you never knew what was around the next corner, and that was exciting to us.
So have you taken quite a different approach on this second trip then, having had that first experience?
We've traveled a lot slower. We see things, we get off the bikes a little bit, probably not as much as Robbie would like. Like we're still trying to go off-road as much as we can, just treating it as it comes, to be honest. I think we were more stressed the first time because we were young. Me and my mate were younger, 25 at the time, so we weren't like some people. But it was our first stab at a long trip, so we were a little bit more apprehensive.
So you said earlier you've got 4 months left of this trip. What are you going to do when you get back?
Cry, I think. We'll get some trial bikes and mess about with them. But first things first, I think I'll probably have a little mess about on the TT, maybe on one of the C90s, because they're funny. Inadequate, really, but really funny. I'm going to go to the Himalayas with my old man and my mate from the previous trip, because I want to maximise like the time off I have. I've left my job, but apparently it's open for when I come back. But we want to kind of make the most of having time, because it's not a luxury you usually have when you're in employment.
Do you work at all whilst you're away, or is it all just done on money you earn at home?
Money you earn at home rather than earning, but I wish I could earn on the road, to be honest. But if I was to do it long term, again, that'd be a great way of doing it, I think. A bit more flexibility. You definitely don't have an end date then. And we've done quite well to stretch our budget how we have so far.
Are you in debt from it?
No, not in debt yet. We've got everything to finish it. It's just afterwards, it's not a lot left.
What work do you do when you're home?
Civil engineering for different consultancies. Been doing that for like 10 years. So that's what's funded it, really. I had plenty of time to save up and things.
I've done a bit of a Bruce Teapot one. I asked my youngest son for some... I had to go and pick him up before I came on the podcast, and I asked him for some questions to ask you. So he's come up with some great questions. So these are from Wilfred, aged 15. He's being fairly ironic with these. He is quite a funny kid, actually. What is your go-to meal deal?
I'm going to be pretty boring. I'll be saying chicken and bacon stuff. It's pretty basic.
Second question was, what's your favourite Fortnite skin?
John Wick.
Wilfred's current one is Peter Griffin from Family Guy.
That's got to be an easy target.
It's a very slim, muscly version of Peter Griffin. You seem to be camping quite a lot. Any pieces of kit that have been working out really well for you, that have lasted well?
MSR Whisperlight. It's a stove which uses petrol or any other really fuel. Been absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't be without that for a trip like this. You've always got fuel in your bike, presumably. So that's been absolutely perfect. The tent, we used an MSR Elixir 3. I used the 2 for the previous trip and I never had a single problem. It's been good until recently. Now it's 14 months in. The lips are a bit scratchy, probably needed a bit more maintenance than we're giving it. I've lubed it a couple of times. Yeah, that's been pretty good overall. Alp Kit do nice sleeping bags. We've used those, both of ours. So we've used those in -15. And then sometimes we have to use it when we're in our hammocks, even though it's incredibly hot, just to stop the mosquitoes biting through the hammocks.
You've taken hammocks and tents?
Well, we bought hammocks because we needed hammocks to go on the rivers, the Amazonic rivers and things, because that's how everybody sleeps. Some people don't have beds even in their homes in some of these countries. So we bought one with a mosquito net integrated, probably for £20 or something, off their reversion of Amazon. And it doesn't take up much room. It takes up less than a sleeping bag for sure, because it is that lightweight. The problem is we get bit by mosquitoes through there if we don't put something underneath us.
I don't get hammocks. They look really uncomfortable. Whenever I've tried to lie in one, they just look awful.
Like, it has to be really, really long and flat, and then it's okay.
How do you sleep on your side in a hammock? That's what always baffles me.
I kind of stick my knees out and my foot out, and it's just kind of awkward, actually. Sleeping on your back's really the way forward.
I saw a picture on the boats. Everybody's got their hammocks slung out. Presumably, you could just take a camping mat and a sleeping bag if you wanted to, I suppose.
But I guess if it becomes, I don't know how turbulent it would get there, but the swaying motion gets you more because you've got the hammock's hanging there, so it's got a bit more neutral. The other thing is, when we were on the Amazon the second time, I think it was, there was a massive storm and you really couldn't see anything off the edge of the boat, but it came at 2 a.m, so we were all asleep, and it came through and completely drenched everybody, completely. So, and all the floor, all the bags were completely covered in water. It was really bad. So obviously that wakes you up, try and tie down all the curtains, etc. But if you were sleeping on the floor, then you'd have been really fucked, wouldn't you?
River dolphin stuff, that's incredible, isn't it? I can see why that was a highlight.
We went to a restaurant and they said we could camp there by the edge of the river, and they're like, come to the river, come see this. And they were going snap, snap with their hands, and we didn't know what they meant. We thought like a crocodile. Do they have a friendly crocodile or caiman or whatever? Come on. We never didn't think of a dolphin. And then,
so you didn't know what was coming?
No.
Wow.
You just knock on the side and it came. It just come for some attention in that, really. I don't know if they feed it or what, but it was a while. There was 2 of them, and then after a while you just jump in with them and they just come up to you. Things like that. You find lots of information actually, which is really useful. We found it on an app called iOverlander. It's an absolutely brilliant free app which is all offline, and it tells you where all these attractions, fuel and camp spots for wild camping and whatever is. That's how we find most of the good stuff.
Funny you should mention that, because I've been in touch with iOverlander and they're going to come and do a podcast. I think they'll just put a new version out, so they've been a bit busy just before Christmas, so hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be chatting to them. Yeah.
I'd say that's incredible. You were either going to say, I once worked for iOverlander, or you're going to say they're coming on the podcast. One of those 2 things is guaranteed.
It's the latter.
Okay, good.
It's the pull of the podcast. That's what it is.
Is there anything else? Any good stories you wanted to tell that we haven't given you the opportunity to yet?
There's things on the first trip. For instance, in Pakistan, we got chased by the police. We played dumb and just rounded them, got chased by them. Again, 15 minutes later, we thought we were going to have our pants pulled down. They wanted to tell us that they weren't terrorists and to enjoy Pakistan and come home and say whether we enjoyed it or not. And that was it. And then photos, obviously. That was quite fun. Jordan got hit twice in India by bikes. You have to be cautious there. Strange one, to be honest, because they made eye contact with myself, didn't pull out, and then they made eye contact with Jordan, then pulled out at the last minute. The TTR, absolutely fine. Bearing in mind, he doesn't have a starter motor, by the way, for this, but he spins the bike around the other way, the CG125. They have eggs on the back, apparently. They're 2 up, spins them completely the wrong way round. They get up, dust themselves, a big crowd comes running over, and we heard horror stories in India, so we're like, fuck, let's get out of here. So that's what we do. They got up, it was kind of their fault. We abandoned the situation, looked after ourselves there, and luckily he hadn't stalled the bike, because I couldn't come back and bump start him. But we proceeded to get chased down as well. So we were having to hit traffic. I was having to block people to let him through, then I'd go through, and it just carried on for a good 20 minutes. That was a fun story, I guess.
You've had no nasty offs in South America?
There was like a mossy, muddy patch on the trail we did from the coast of Brazil to Ouro Preto, which is like a colonial city for mining gold in the day, I guess. I hit the ground pretty hard with my knee. I really hit it hard. It like bounced twice, and it just like slipped out from underneath me. And it did get me wondering whether or not I should upgrade my knee armors.
Dan, tell us your China story.
So as part of our trip, we had to go through China to get from Tajikistan to Pakistan. It's along a route called the Karakoram Highway. And to get there, we had a problem getting the visas because you can't go around this area of political instability. There's I've written it down, Uyghur Muslims there, which is densely populated. So obviously devoted to Islam rather than the Chinese state. So to get in, we went across a border, which was only just opened for tourists. I think in 2018, there weren't many people. It's called Kulma Pass. And we had to pay about £1,500 to spend 3 days, I think it was, in China, and to do very little mileage in the grand scheme of things, maybe 300 miles, I think it is. The weird thing was that you hire this company to look after you. They're appointed by the government. They have 2 people who are the guides, and I'm told that it's there so that if one says something against the regime, the other one can I don't know whether to do that or not. So to get in, we went into this border. We didn't have our guide with us at this point because we were on the top of the mountain. You ride your bike in, soldiers either side, like fully armed, 5 of them or so for each bike in this case. Strip down your luggage, take your bags out kind of thing. You have all your bags gone through. You have all of your electrics scanned. Jordan had his laptop, so I don't know what was on there. And then you have to put everything through a massive X-ray. And then we had to have the bikes put through the X-ray as well. And then you ride down the mountain. We tried to find the guide. We can't find the guide. We can't speak any version of Mandarin. In the end, he found us. Prior to this, we couldn't arrange anything because we didn't have any internet or anything. Because in Tajikistan, they only had like electricity 2 hours a day in the city we were staying in, Murgab, which isn't really a city, but absolutely tiny. So Wi-Fi, out of the question. So we had to meet them, go through. Basically, the whole ordeal meant we had to go back up the hill again with our guide, 12 hours in total. Also going through these places, bump starting Jordan every 2 minutes, obviously, so we don't look great anyway, look like jokers trying to get away in. It was absolutely beautiful riding north to Kashgar, which is a city which we needed to stay for 2 nights for some reason. Don't know why, maybe to justify the fee. We went there and we were traveling at 3,000 meters and like in this valley, and you could see to the right-hand side, there was a huge mountain, which is 7,600 to 7,800. You could see the bottom to the top. So it really was special. Like you don't really see that kind of change in elevation anywhere. And not bullshitting you at all, but we saw an avalanche for like probably a third of the whole height when we were there, which was spectacular. And it took like our minds a little while to process until the guide was like, yeah, that's an avalanche. Like, along this road, like of absolute beauty, you saw lots of small villages and they were completely covered with fences, like palisade fences with the spikes on top, and that nobody to be seen in these huts apart from soldiers walking around their arms. That was it. They like, don't know if they're under curfew or whatever, but you know, we think, oh, this is a bit strange. And you see this again and again. And then you see passport controls everywhere. They have to show their national ID. We have to show our passports in and out of the car for a very long period of time, again and again. And then in the morning, we get shown around part of the city where they select to go. And you see police everywhere. You see riot police. And after the trip, we start seeing a lot of articles about the Uyghur Muslims and about how apparently there's mass genocide going on there. And there was articles saying about just outside Kashgar city, there was re-education centres, they call them, and I don't know where the truth lies, but there's talk of like mass sterilisation and like torture and people's accounts of having to give, say, a friend or family over to spare their own lives. I don't know what's true, but I saw plenty of towns or small villages, just completely basically wiped out, dead. The fact that in an article apparently in Kashgar city was that centre, we weren't allowed to take photos, we had things deleted before and after. It all seems potentially very real. It was a really weird feeling to be in this country, which is actually so beautiful, but this like police regime.
Would you recommend to anybody to visit China?
I think you should be as outspoken as possible in there.
Did you enjoy the experience of visiting China after all of this? Was it still an enjoyable trip?
I was a passenger for most of it in a van, but like the views in between the border to the Kashgar cities was absolutely stunning. Like, I haven't seen it since. Like, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan are brilliant, but that mountain and the avalanche was just like a spectacular circumstance and view, as with some of the other lakes. But I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It kind of put me off a little bit. Maybe other regions are different, but it does make me think what is out there, because it's not a place which is well traveled. Recently, they've actually released, I think for 6 countries, like a 2-week transit visa. So it might be easier now to do that route for some people. We didn't have an option at the time because in our mind, Afghanistan was a no-go. But on the way, we met people who went through there and loved it.
What's the noodles for breakfast about?
It's a cheap way to eat. So we have quite a lot of noodles, and actually we don't have that many for breakfast. And it was kind of like a weird name. Well, thanks for having me. And Noel, try and stay upright on your bike.
What do you mean, try and stay upright?
Yeah, Noel, broken foot.
All day, every day, I feel a little twinge in my foot with a constant reminder of what happened to me. It's a nightmare.
That's because you're getting old. There you go. Massive thanks to Dan for doing that. Much appreciated, and enjoy the final 4 months before you have to come back to real life like the rest of us. Feels like we're back with the podcast now, back in the swing of things. Got loads of good guests actually in the diary lined up to record and talk to us. If you've got any ideas for content, any ideas for people that we should be talking to, give us a shout. Facebook or Instagram. And again, just a reminder, please vote in our annual awards, which you will find again through Facebook or Instagram. All right, see you next time. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.